Hello, everybody. It's been 3 weeks, 3 weeks since the last episode. It may have been like 5 weeks. But we are back and we are going to talk about the cons of being digital nomad. But we also don't really want it to be super negative. These are challenges and hurdles to overcome. And over time, we'll probably have other episodes that are focus on cons, so to speak, negatives, but with strategies on how to actually handle them. Because there are ways around them. But these are some of the kind of observations we've had. Plus, we stay tuned because we have been on another podcast as guests. And that will be coming out in the next week or so. It may even be out when this is out, when you're listening to this now. Which was really cool with Anne from Digital Nomad Stories, which you may have already been listening to. So definitely take a listen. We'll share it on our many social media networks when that is the case.
Yep, that's the thing too. We've got all new platforms being set up as we speak. So we'll have the links for everybody to follow that as well. Between even the ones we were trying to put off. I was trying to avoid TikTok, but it's apparently here to stay, so we will be on there as well, and we'll be putting our useful shorts and clips from some of these episodes into TikTok and also Instagram, and then we'll have our YouTube shorts up as well.
Looking forward to that. That's going to be really good. Awesome. Cool. Cons of being a digital nomad. So I've put the first one I put in till we have like a little notes area is moving around quickly can affect your work. So depending on what level you are, not level, but what stage you are in your journey of location independence, if you have a lot of work on, moving around quickly, and I mean like 2 to 4 weeks at a time, is quite disruptive. Although I think it depends on how old you are. I reckon like some 20-year-olds, like early 20s, maybe they're okay doing it. But I'm certainly not early 20s anymore, and I don't know, it feels like sometimes quite tiring to move around. And don't get me wrong, it's not the physical moving around, it's the new place, find out where everything is, where's the gym, where are you going to work from, meeting the new people, and like that stuff takes mental energy. And when you're trying to run the business at the same time, it can detract from that and make it feel harder. Has that been the case for you?
Yeah, and it's also, things take longer than you expect too, right? So every time I've made a move and I've had client meetings and things set up that I needed to attend, or just projects that had deadlines, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I don't need to take time off for this. I'll work in the airport, which is bullshit. That never happens because, you end up just doing other things or, hanging out or sleeping. Yeah. And things always take longer than you think. Like you get to the new place, and even if you researched everything ahead of time and you have everything locked in, you're right. You still have to go find places. Something's not going to be working correctly no matter where you land. So yeah, I've made that mistake several times, especially when you're changing time zones too. So as a general rule now, I may not take an entire day off, but I just plan for that cushion. I let all my clients know, hey, I'm available. I've got my phone. I've got Slack on my phone. I've got all the things that I shouldn't have on my phone. If you need me, I'm there, but I will be traveling. So don't expect a whole lot out of me during this time.
Yeah, that's a good approach, and what I've also done as well. But even you saying that makes me think it's possibly even better to actually look at that period of time where you're moving around and just be like, I'm actually just off. Mainly, I think for the purpose of when you land in that new place, you're not like, okay, I need to get the laptop open and attend to those things. If actually I'm going to try this next time, actually it'd be amazing to just get on that plane and know that I'm not back at work for 2 more days. So like you get there, you settle in, you find the places that you want to, that are important to you, like the health stuff and actually a place to work. So that might be a good way to handle that.
Yeah, and we all humans do this all the time, where we're like, oh, it's no big deal, like that, that whatever the fallacy is, where something's in the future, and you're like, oh, it's no big deal. I know, like for me, we're going back to Mexico to Playa del Carmen here in October, and I'm thinking, it's a 4-hour flight from where I am now. Big deal. I've been there before, but in my mind, what I need to do is put a block on there and say, I'm not going to do anything the day of. and I'm not going to be available the day after, because I'll do that now where I'm like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead and, schedule 10 meetings for the day for the day after I get there, because something will inevitably go wrong and everything else. So you just really do have to start protecting your time. And I'm guilty of it. I'll do that too, where I'll just say, sure, I'll have Wi-Fi on the plane, and then I'm just miserable having to try to get things done in that little tiny seat.
It's the worst place to work, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, I think, to be fair, every time I get on a plane and know I have a flight coming up, I try to like see that time as, and this is a bit sad, but literally it's like, cool, I'm in a plane looking down on the world, and I try and do like high level thinking at that point. So it's like looking at the business and doing my own strategy for my own stuff. So I try and like tee that time up for that kind of work, which is nicer because it's usually not necessary to have the laptop open. You can have a pen and paper, or you're just thinking about things. And it can be quite nice when you land in a new place. If you've got new things you want to be trying out, it goes quite well together. So you're in a new place, and there is something called the fresh start effect, which is a psychological phenomenon where especially if you change environments, it can be quite easy to start new habits, build new routines, because it feels like you're kind of reinventing yourself in a very small way for certain things. But yes, definitely it can be a challenge as a digital nomad to move around quickly, which is why I think a lot of people are now slow madding. That's the term, right? Where it's like maybe you're in a place for 2 or 3 months, or even 6 months to a year, which some people might say is not traveling. It's definitely on a longer horizon where you might be traveling for 3 years, but staying in different places for much longer periods of time. But I totally get that now, having done this for 9 or so months.
Yeah, though we started from the beginning. We decided that we were going to do, because there's 2 of us, and you've seen, I'll have to flash up on the screen the ridiculous amount of luggage that we have. It's like a lot. I don't think it's a lot compared to what I got rid of, but it is a lot of luggage. And we found that 2 months in a place is okay. We spent 2 months in Bali. I could have spent longer there. 3 months seems to be a good rule. I'm not opposed to the whole. I know you moved a lot quicker intervals. A couple weeks here and there. I tend to feel a little too rushed on that. So I think 3 months is a good time zone, depending upon the visa situation, of course. But yeah, no, just skipping around like that frequently just adds, because traveling's stressful. As exciting as it is, you're also on the back end. There's all kinds of stress involved, whether you're dealing with the visa thing or the flights, and the airports try to do the best they can, but there's always problems there. So yeah, no, I think that if it's kind of a double-edged thing, but it is a con, having the freedom to move around if you overbook yourself, and just having that added pressure, especially work. And now, so the other thing too is we try to travel and check in on weekdays. It's a little bit cheaper to fly, of course, and then you're also up against work. So ideally, we all fly on Saturdays and Sundays and have a day to check out your new location, but it doesn't always work that way with work, especially as a freelancer when you may be up against a deadline on a weekend. So yeah, keeping up with the work and also trying to set yourself a buffer is really important. Keep your sanity anyway.
Yeah, 100%. And this is one of we can turn it into a good situation with the ability to take that time off. And that's ultimately one of the reasons why we do this, is to have that flexibility, as I'm sure many listeners, if they're not already doing this, are interested in having. So that is one of the perks of running your own thing, is that you have more flexibility to take days off like that if you need to travel and move around. The next one we had on the list is very similar, and I've personally experienced this in the last couple of months, moving around. I think if you're slow madding, it's easier to protect this, but if you're doing it quickly, like less than 2 months in any place, your routines can get negatively affected. So my gym routines recently have been affected. And I say this as if it's the travel's fault. It's not the travel's fault. It's my fault. However, there's definitely increased difficulty moving from one place where you were in a really good routine to another. I don't know why. I don't know why it's suddenly more difficult. But yeah, I went from Bulgaria to Italy, and maybe it was because also it was Italy and it was summer and it was warm and there were more parties in the evening, etc. So less desire to go to the gym, especially if it was hotter. And those gyms did not have great air conditioning. So it was a bit of a sweat fest. But yeah, I've noticed that like hard to get back into it for sure.
Yeah, no, especially because, like every place is different. Like, for example, like you just mentioned about the gym. So we're back in Detroit now, and the gym that's not too far from here is busy at different times than the gyms that we were at overseas. So, and that goes for stores, like some grocery stores, and the things that you need for your daily life. So, it goes back to just kind of learning your way around and getting a new, you may be used to, I go to the gym every day at 6 a.m. Well, you get to your new destination and it's completely packed. You can't even get in there and you have to start going in the evening. And again, these aren't, huge insurmountable problems, but it does throw you off for a little bit. So especially if there's a time change involved.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. And so I think the more you can, in your travels, extend the horizon a little bit to 2 to 3 months, and especially that gives you a little bit more time to plan ahead and figure out where the best places for you to go are, so your routines aren't affected. And that's like grocery shopping as well, because, no one wants the nearest grocery shop to be super far away, or the nearest health supplements, if you're into that kind of thing, like you want to build your environment that's conducive to the kind of routines you want to have, right? So I think that's the antidote, is planning and giving yourself more time to have that transition.
Yeah. And there's a wealth of information now, with Facebook groups, and they're not all, anybody who's been on any Facebook group for any topic doesn't just have to be digital nomads. There are some helpful groups, and then there are some groups where it's just a bunch of morons yelling at each other all day, which I really enjoy. I like going through the comments and watching all that stuff too. But we do a fair amount of that now, where we try to get in. You can go into these groups and you can search for information. You can ask questions. A lot of it, like going back to Mexico, we were there before. We had a problem getting supplements in certain things. And then we had to, look up, I had to get some dental work done, like life things happen, so just doing a little bit of research ahead of time and trying to set that up as best you can really helps. And fortunately now there's quite a large community of nomads out there and expats. So it'd be very, very hard to not find the information you need ahead of time, so, and that kind of leads us into our next topic here with the building relationships. And we found through traveling, and of course we're a couple, so not you, not me and Reese, but yeah, we're a couple, so we travel.
I wasn't aware of that, Lex. I think I may have had the wrong idea with all of this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Like, shit, I gotta cancel the episode. Yeah, we gotta talk. But but we talked about this before, where Jesse and I will be out. We kind of get like, because we're a team, and especially if you go to a country where obviously we speak English, and we try to learn as best we can, but you're not going to be fluent if you're somewhere for a few months. So meeting other people and getting involved in groups, and there are a wealth of information on Facebook for meetups and things like that we found very helpful. And most major nomad spots now have co-working of some form, and that's a great place to go. Like me, I used to be a heavy drinker. Not when I say heavy, I mean heavy. And my means of meeting new people anywhere was on a bar stool, which I think about all the time. I love doing that stuff. It's just not conducive for my health anymore. But I found that co-working, even though they do have beer and wine there sometimes, but even though we don't go there to drink necessarily, it's kind of the same vibe. You go in, there's a kind of a communal setting. People are, the ones that want to be social are sitting at the community tables and everything like that. And so for meeting new people, we found that, everybody's just kind of, because we all know that we're there and we're kind of, misplaced, for example, like we're not home. So it's really easy to strike up a conversation in a co-working space. And I know I think you've done more co-working and co-living than I have. So what's your experience with that?
Yeah, it's the best. I think that So to come back a little bit, I think that if you were not a digital nomad but you wanted to travel, there's a couple of ways to do it. You either grab a group of mates and go somewhere, Southeast Asia, and you do the kind of typical route, or any route you please, but you go with a group of mates, or you go on a soul-searching solo travel experience in any place in the world. Those are the two typical approaches for like a longer-term travel period, like 6 months, maybe even 12 months. And when you're digital nomading, you are working, obviously, and that has its own stresses. And don't get me wrong, the other forms of travel have different stresses as well, especially if you do the solo travel route. There's, lots of challenges there. But when you are working, it's extremely helpful to be surrounded by similar people that, love travel, obviously, and are also building their own businesses or working remotely, and something they're passionate in. And utilizing things like co-working and co-living help you find communities you can kind of slot into. And I think in reality, there's very, very few people on the earth that genuinely don't want to see people for 6 months of the year, as in like they really are on their own, like in Siberia or something, living off of that. Like there are people like that, but I think there's far few people that really do enjoy that and want that than people who maybe say they want that. And keep in mind that as you travel, if you do decide to go more like Airbnbs on your own, it may suck sometimes because you don't have that group of people that you're kind of getting to know on a deeper level. And to be honest, even with the co-living spaces, if you're moving around quickly, again, going back to the previous 2 points, if you're moving around quickly, even the people in those spaces, it is hard to build deeper kind of connections. But it depends. It's a little bit of potluck. You will meet people that you spend 2 weeks with and you click instantly. The chemistry is amazing and you will, cherish those friends probably forever. But yeah, I think the co-living and co-working are just super easy and simple ways to kind of like, cool, you're going to go to a new place. Maybe consider use that as your little base to live or to work. And then you can go off and do some solo things from that. But I think the kind of foundation, depending on who you are and what you like, at least for me, I preferred that way because at least, and that's through experience of doing quite a few solo Airbnbs, that I was just like, actually, I just rather have a place I could go to. If I want to go down to the kitchen and hang out with people, I can straight away. It's not like, oh, I have to go online, look for a group or a meetup. It's like they're already there and the chance that I'm going to get on with them is super, super high because we're all doing similar things.
Yeah, that's true. And you've got that built-in, companion for something. So for example, I'm sure if you show up to a co-living place, there's people at different stages. Like somebody may have just arrived the morning that you got there. Somebody may have been there for a month. So you walk in the door and you're like, well, I think you've even done this before. Like, there's a walking tour that I want to do. Does anybody want to go? And inevitably somebody there will either have done it and be able to give you information or they'll want to go as well. So you kind of have that built-in wealth of local knowledge too.
Yeah.
And it just kind of keeps rotating and building on itself. So, it is also, I've learned a lot too, as far as my writing career goes, because we also find that not only do we all have a lot in common because of our travel, but most of us do similar type jobs. So I've learned a lot from people, just other copywriters and other marketers, because it's rare, like you go to a bar here, for example, you could run into somebody, like I could hang out with somebody who's a plumber that, great job, but I, don't know a thing about it. And I find that most of those co-working spaces or the meetups are people that have very similar interests travel-wise and career-wise as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the level of openness tends to be quite higher. And I mean, at least personally for me, that's quite an important thing. And I think it's comforting to know that they're your people, which I think when you're traveling and experiencing new places, it's amazing to have that. you're in that new place, you want to go visit some of the attractions or whatever, or go out for food, like you've got people instantly, you can be like, hey, do you want to go? I had that in Italy. I was in a really, really cool co-living, Casa B Natural. So they're an organization. They do lots of things across Italy. The essence, from what I understood, is that they are trying to revive and protect local knowledge, especially in deeply rural areas that are a little bit forgotten from the kind of more built-up areas in Italy, which is a really cool project, and working with artisan locals like honey producers and, bakers, etc. Really, really cool. And they have a co-living space in Matera in Italy, which is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world, which is pretty cool, stunning, really beautiful, and really cool people. You wanted to go for food. There was always a couple of people that wanted to go, especially coffee in Italy. And a couple of like music events were on, and we were kind of invited by the organizations, some of the members and their friends, etc. So super, super communal. And yeah, you're like bought into an automatic community straight away.
Yeah, and that reminds me of speaking of cons, and I think you experienced this too, the reverse culture shock of coming back home after being gone for so long. And that applies to several things. So I love being back in the US. Obviously all my family's here, all my stores, I can buy all kinds of gadgets and have it shipped to the house in the same day. But I've probably put on at least 10 pounds since being back, just because we were in Vietnam, and most of the food in Southeast Asia is fairly healthy. Definitely not our stupid sized portions that we have here. So a con for me for coming back home is just eating too much, trying to get to the gym like we talked about earlier. And it's just kind of the reverse culture shock. Every country has its political issues, and it's not as bad here as if you watch the news, it makes it look like we're a disaster over here. It's really not that bad. But just like coming home and going to a couple things, or going to like a store, or I keep saying bar because I love them so much, but it's like, holy shit, it feels a little weird, and it's a little out of place for a bit. So, and it's getting back into some unhealthy habits that I had back here. That's just a willpower thing for me. But I think you had the same experience because you just got back from Italy. You're back in the UK now, and I think, did you say you went to a couple festivals over there?
Got the festival this Sunday. Peggy Goo for anyone who's interested. But yeah, reverse culture shock. So I am currently sat in a co-working space in a place called Bicester in the UK. I grew up near here. And it's strange. It's really strange to be back. It was odd. I surprised some of my old colleagues in London when I first arrived. I literally got off the plane, went straight to the office and surprised people. And yeah, it was strange being back. It's funny because you come back, and I think this is said quite often in the travel space, is you come back and like everyone's kind of doing the same stuff. And no one's been on like not no one, but like people are kind of still in their routines. They're still going to that same bar on the same day of the week, etc. And they've not been through any particularly enlightening experiences, perhaps, that are more conducive when you are traveling. So like you go through that stuff when you're on the road and you experience things, and you kind of come back and you're like, you don't really want to just like offload all of that to people, because one, they're unlikely to understand, because you kind of got to be there to understand it. And you just come across as one of those guys,
Yeah, no, it's a balance. It's funny because you're too kind. I was going to say I come back and everybody bores me. Everybody bores me. Yeah, because you're right, because everybody has their daily. And I lived that life for long time, where I had my daily routine, I had my favorite spots, I had my errands that I would run, the people I would see regularly, whether it was a neighbor or a coworker. And then when you come back and you have all these things that you just did that were like vastly different experiences from all these places, and then people are still talking about like, oh, I guess we got to go, cut the grass today, or we got to run to whatever, which is that's their thing. But I'm like, oh shit, and you're right about not wanting to just come in the door wherever you're at and start talking about all the fun you had and great experiences unless people ask. So it is a little strange, because people, that's human nature. Whatever little tribe or whatever little bubble we're in, that becomes our world, So and that's one of the best things about being able to do this is that it changes so much. But it is challenging coming back and going to the same places. And I'm like, God, you're still sitting here, you're still on this bar stool after all these years. Now that said, I was that moron sitting on the same bar stool every day at 4:00 in Florida for 15 years. So I've been there too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, for sure. And also I think that one of the cons, if you like, is you are likely to come back and people will have, whilst they may be doing mostly the same things, they've also moved on in many ways, and life moves on in those places that you used to live. And it can be a negative because especially if you plan to do this for a very long time, those lives will move on considerably at some point, and you won't have been there necessarily for some of those moments. And it is something to just keep in mind that if you decide to travel long term, moving from place to place, you are likely to experience that kind of, I think it's a little bit deeper than like fear of missing out. I think it's especially with the people were close to or are close to, even if you're at a distance, because there's like critical moments that people go through within friendships, etc., and you won't be there. So just keep that in mind. But what for me it's made me realize is cool. Like I definitely want to keep in touch more when I am on the road, to kind of be there in some way, because you still can be, even if you're not physically there.
Yeah, we actually see a couple of points to that. I'm actually more excited to come home now, and I'm excited to see people that I really enjoyed being around. But when you're around somebody every day, it just becomes normal. It's not that big of a deal. So having that like excitement of coming back into a town that I've been to 100 times, but I'm like, oh, look at this new store over here. Like things that people take for granted when it's in front of you all the time. I've had that experience too. So that's been really nice, and just keeping it fresh. And we see, I see family more now than ever. Before, like when I was in Florida, for example, my family's up here, a couple thousand miles away. We would, travel back once a year, maybe. Now, after being gone for that length of time and being nomadic in the States as well, they're just like, hey, let's go spend 2 weeks at my mother's place or my dad's place. We filmed from before. So that's it's kind of, everything's kind of fresh, but you do have to keep up with people. Social media helps with that. But I do find it, I'm a little more excited to kind of see what everyone's up to when you're removed from it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely makes you not take things for granted, even just the ability to do this. Extremely lucky. Bit of hard work thrown in there, but a lot of luck. Family, I think, is quite an important aspect for a lot of people, and this is a way to see more family, especially if your family's like dispersed. And I imagine it's quite common in the US because you've got such a big country. I think of like 5-hour car journeys as like, oof. But like for you, it's more like you have to get on a plane to see family out there.
Yeah, I think I forget. I've driven the country several times across, and it's from one coast to another. I mean, it's days. Like you could drive all the way through, but I think it's like 50 hours of driving or something like that. But yeah, the flights are a little bit of a challenge. But now, like when we did one of our episodes, I was in my dad's barn, and how we go spend longer in places, get to kind of learn or get to kind of know those areas a little bit better. But yeah, there's, for every negative impact from all this traveling, there's 10 positive things that have come out of it. So definitely it'll be 2 years now in November. We're actually going back to where we started in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and it'll be the 2-year mark on November 2nd. And man, it's been great. Like so, I know our episode's about cons here, but there have been very, very few and far between. And nothing's insurmountable, especially with technology and using your network of other travelers.
For sure. It's really good to know that you started on the 2nd. I started on the 6th of November. So that's pretty cool. Very close. I think the the way I frame all of these cons is like gratitude. It just makes me more grateful for the time you do get with people, for when you do have that routine in place. Like, be grateful, like, one, that you're able to do all those things, and you know, if that routine breaks, you will be able to get it back, and you can deploy tactics to prevent it happening in the first place.
It's the whole, it's the whole scarcity thing, like in marketing. If there's less of something, if there's less seeing people, less seeing family, less seeing the places you love, that's that. So we'll end here. I'm going to show everybody, because I'm down in a basement. I got my new manatee slippers.
No way.
Arrived. Yeah, got a little manatee down there. Yeah. I got the cheapest shit. It's power of Amazon. So
That's
we'll end our con episode with that. We'll leave everybody with that. But our links will be in the show notes. We've got our new TikTok channel, Instagram. We haven't been on Threads yet, but that's next. So links will be in the show notes, and we've got a couple of episodes coming up with new guests. And we were also just on Anne's episode, like we mentioned before, and we'll also link to that.
See you later.
Sounds good, everybody. See ya.